Welcome to today's event. My name is Megan O'Rourke, and I'm the Associate Director of Regional Programs for the Office of Alumni Relations at USD. We're really happy to have you for today's event, Taking Your Local Company Global. Today's session is hosted by the University of San Diego Honolulu Torero Club and features USD and Hawaii's own Brittany Hyde, class of 2007, co-founder of Mana Up, a Hawaii-based initiative designed to build the next generation of CEOs in the retail and food product industry. During our time at home, the Alumni Association has pivoted to offering a variety of virtual programs that provide alumni meaningful ways to stay in touch, advance their professional career, and learn something new while we await the day to be in person once again. We've also had the opportunity to highlight the wonderful things our alumni are doing in their professional careers and throughout their own businesses, such as today's event featuring Brittany and Mana Up. A few housekeeping items to note before we begin. Should you have any questions for Brittany throughout today's conversation, please use the chat feature, and we will address it during the Q&A at the end of the program with the audience, time permitting. Also, to ensure the integrity and viewer experience of today's event, we ask that you keep your line muted and your camera off during the duration of the event. Please feel free to hide non-video participants and change your viewing preference to speaker view by clicking the top buttons in the top three in the corner of your Zoom screen. Today's event is also recorded and will be available on the USD Alumni Association YouTube channel later this week. Without further ado, I would like to introduce today's alumni guest, Brittany Hyde. Welcome, Brittany.
Hi, it's so wonderful to be here. Thank you, Megan and USD for hosting today.
We're so excited to have you and to hear about you and Mana Up. So why don't we get right to it?
All right, awesome. Let's do it.
Perfect. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. Why did you choose USD and what have you been up to since graduation?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in Orange County and I chose USD because weirdly, it was just far enough away from home. It was still close, but far enough that my mom couldn't come visit me just, off randomly. And there was just something about the campus and the people that just made me feel so much at home. Obviously it's a great school with so many great programs. But I think it was more of the energy and the people and the campus that made me, choose USD as the place that I wanted to go to school. So, since then, well, first of all, I majored in political science and accounting and was part of the USD honors program and some other things on campus. So had such a great time. After graduation, I moved to Washington, DC. I lived there for almost 10 years. I went to Georgetown Law School and I was able to work at the White House doing economic development under President Obama. I co-founded a company called 1776 that was based in Washington, DC, and just had such a great experience there. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say that I met my husband at USD in my freshman year. So we got married in about, I think it's been 11 years. And he's been with me through this whole experience. And we moved back to his hometown on Maui about 4 years ago. And that's around when I started Mana Up with my business partner, Melly.
We love a good Torero love story.
We are definitely one of those.
Aw, that's great to hear. You've obviously accomplished a lot, and I'm sure you've taken a lot of what you did before Mana Up and applied it to your business now. So really excited to talk more a little bit more about that. Mm-hmm. So all of this, as I mentioned, led you to where you are now, co-founding Mana Up, a statewide initiative to build up and support Hawaii's ecosystem of entrepreneurs. Can you tell us more about Mana Up and how it came to be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of back up a little bit, what's interesting is my short time at the Obama White House is one of the most impactful experiences of my career. And part of that is because it exposed me to the whole world of entrepreneurship. We partnered with Steve Case and launched a program called Startup America in kind of like the midst of the 2009 economic crisis, that was all around growing startups around communities across the United States. And so I was involved in that from, a high level policy standpoint, but then I started getting involved in Startup DC, which was the local chapter of that organization. And my company that I started after that, 1776, was a direct outgrowth of that through the people I had met through Startup DC, and really around how could we use the regional strengths of DC to grow innovation in key sectors like healthcare, education, energy, transportation. And really felt like the world was at our fingertips being, in DC. Now, we started having kids and it was time to move back to Hawaii. And one of the big surprises, although I guess it shouldn't have been as surprising coming to Hawaii, was the lack of opportunity. So, my first reaction was, oh, let me see what's available, what jobs are here, what could I get involved in? And there was nothing that, was an easy opportunity for me. And that was surprising because in DC, I could have done anything. I really felt like. And so, I had heard about the brain drain and all of that sort of stuff through Nick and his family and friends and all that, but it was really real once I was here. And so that led to Mana Up, because I met my co-founder Melly very early after moving here. And we started talking about what really makes sense for Hawaii to grow the economy, to grow jobs, to reverse that brain drain, to really grow opportunity for locals here who want to stay here and grow their careers here. And so we centered around the brand of Hawaii and local consumer brands and products. It was already organically growing through things like we have a festival called Made in Hawaii Festival, where all the local makers come to the convention center, and there's tens of thousands of people that come. But what we kind of felt like is if all of the resources that were being poured into tech startups was reapplied to these consumer brand startups, what could happen? And we started Mana Up around that, an accelerator for consumer brands in Hawaii around food, beverage, fashion, art, home, beauty, all things like that are mostly manufactured here or sourced from here, 100% based here. And how do we grow those brands to markets worldwide? So that's kind of what led us to Mana Up.
That's awesome. And actually, you and I have had a couple of off-screen conversations about Mana Up, and obviously we're in COVID right now, and there's still a pandemic that's going on. But you've actually have been able to pivot quite well because of COVID, and have had a lot of opportunities since the pandemic started. Can you talk to us more about those pivots and how Mana Up has adapted?
Yeah, of course. The last year has been crazy. And one of the things that we did for Mana Up was we launched a retail shop right in the heart of Waikiki. And it was so exciting. We opened our doors in January and we had to close our doors right in March, which was such a bummer. But what was really exciting about, now looking back on the last year and everything we've experienced, we shifted, our full focus to our e-commerce presence from the retail side, and, experienced a lot of growth through there. And now that tourism is starting to come back, we're not only seeing our online, e-commerce business really thrive, but now our retail business thrive as well. So it's really made us stronger. And looked at that challenge as an opportunity for how do we grow, how do we do business differently to stay afloat here. When we look at the overall Mana Up portfolio, these are all consumer brands. We've got 51 companies in our portfolio now. And so many of them did the same thing. They had already had e-commerce presence, but they poured all of their focus into it over the last year. And some of them doubled their revenues in the midst of COVID, which is absolutely mind-blowing when you think about most of their wholesale accounts had been taken away from them. And so we're seeing, so much success come from focusing on telling that story through social media, through Instagram and Facebook, through SEO and other things through Google, and just, sharing the narrative with the world in a more direct way.
Very
Oh,
cool.
and one more thing, we usually have a big showcase at the end of each cohort. We do 10 company cohorts, and that's how the companies join Mana Up. That's kind of where we do the intensive program of the workshops and the mentorship and all that. So we always do this showcase graduation for them. And, we thought it was big at 1,000 people party, and, it was so fun. But, we couldn't do that this year. So we did a online showcase where we had 80,000 viewers and a lot of sales through that. And so, now it makes our 1,000-person party look puny.
Wow, 80,000 is a fantastic number. I imagine then, because it used to be in person, but then it went virtual this year, you're probably, with that response, going to figure out a way to do both.
Yes.
Moving forward, to make sure that more people can see it, huh?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So you mentioned, excuse me, the different 10 cohorts that you were talking about that are a part of this accelerator program. So Mana Up has a 12-week accelerator program to scale businesses and to sell Hawaii products to consumers on the global scale. What are the steps in doing so and making a company more accessible for a wider audience?
So I think the first thing to think about is, what is your branding and narrative? And that, not only is, kind of the more superficial, elements of what does your logo look like and your packaging and things like that, but actually, diving deep into, why did this company start? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And what is special about it to you and to your customers? And really getting that down. We have so many companies that go through the Mana Up Accelerator, and they're like, when you talk to them, they're these like incredible stories, but nobody knows about them because they're not telling people. And so we really work a lot with the brands on how do they tell their story and develop that out further. Because when they do, their customers really connect to them. So I think that's really key. What is your narrative, and how does that translate to your logo, to your website, to your social media, to everything that you do that's external? That is very key. So we have mentors that come in, the story brand concepts and things like that, where it talks about how do you describe that narrative to the consumer so they care about it. I think that's the key. Being active, obviously, on Facebook and Instagram, having a great website. We're not going to dive too much into those things because those could get into hours and hours and hours. But those are important, and we do see that when our companies spend time really developing those out, their business success skyrockets. So I think that's step one. That's your foundation. From there, some various tactics that we've deployed over the last year is partnerships. So one key partnership that has been very successful for us is King's Hawaiian. And partnerships are a way to expand your audience to more than what you have. So if your audience, for us is Hawaii, and we're trying to expand to the mainland United States, we think about who is a complementary brand to us that has similar values, where the potential consumers can overlap, and then how do we partner with them to do something that's good for them and good for us. And so King's Hawaiian Sweetbread, I'm sure everyone on the call knows that. So the yummy orange sweetbread in the supermarket, they're crazy big, they're global, and they're owned by a local Hawaii family who, because of their growth, moved to LA in the 90s. But they are still very connected to this community. And so we partnered with them to do a big giveaway to, market jointly on their social media and our social media. And we had tens of thousands of signups through that. And those people are still engaging with our brand because of that campaign that we did together. And, their team as well said, this was one of the most highly active campaigns that we've done with anyone. And I think it's because of that overlap in interest of consumers. And so look at partnerships for who can be strategic, where do you have overlapping values or overlapping consumers where, you know, both parties are going to find it interesting and engaging. I would say one other, you know, thing to look at is look at your data and find ways to test that data. And so, you know, way back at the beginning of 2020, when we were just opening the store, we did find that we had a lot of Japanese customers. Now, they're not back because of the state of the world right now. But what we are doing is we're testing that audience by doing small campaigns. So we did a 2-week Hawaii fair over the summer with a hotel partner there. We're doing another Hawaii fair there right now with a company called Natural Lawson, where they're featuring Mana brands across 150 stores in Tokyo. We did a live stream shopping event with a media platform called Aloha Street. And so those didn't take a lot of investment from our standpoint, but what it's doing is we're finding, are these campaigns successful? Because if they are, one, we're learning a lot. We're learning what's working, what's not. But two, if we do feel like it's working, what does that next stage of growth look like in that market? And so that's very much something that we're doing in Japan right now, in a very iterative way to grow the audience for Mana Up and the brands within Mana Up, and you know, see how we can expand upon it in the future.
That's great. One of the things that we've talked about in our office, especially during COVID, is one, if you never ask, you'll never know the answer. You'll always automatically get a no. But then two,
Yeah.
if you don't try, you never know until you don't try. So those little campaigns that you did allowed you to, you know, receive a lot of good feedback, data for you to be able to move forward. And we've done, you know, a handful of things that are obviously not on the same scale, but similar in some ways that have allowed us to adapt and change in this environment. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, just to add to that, Megan, you know, I think, you know, and especially in school, right? You've got the final, you've got the, you know, the essay that you're turning in that's just done, right? But that's not how the real world works in terms of, you know, how things go. And so, you know, how can you do things in a small way? You don't have to have everything figured out, right? You don't have to have some grand plan that, you know, all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And so to your point, you know, how do you start in a small way where you can learn and adapt and decide how you want to expand and grow?
And actually, speaking of, you know, not having a huge grand plan and just making that initial start, what is a piece of advice, going a little out of order, but what is a piece of advice you give to someone who is looking to start, you know, their own business? And, you know, you don't have to have a grand plan, but you have to have some fundamentals in place. And what would that be? And what would you tell people?
Yeah, I would say, if you have an idea of something that you really feel passionately about, just do it. Just figure out a way to start. Whether it's, you know, spending $30 on, you know, a Shopify plan to start your website, or, you know, getting a Squarespace up, or, you know, just reserving your handle on social media. What are the some of the key steps for you to just start and to get your product out there? So many of the companies we work with, you know, they're hard physical goods, right? They're beverages, they're food. So they start off the farmer's market, right? It's their side gig. But I think, you know, kind of going back to what we were just saying, so many people think they have to have, you know, the business plan all thought out, everything, you know, done. And that's just not the case. You know, you got to start getting it out there and start getting feedback on the product and see how you like it, and how customers like it, and how you can learn and adapt. But the other thing that I would recommend to anyone who is thinking about starting their own company and you know, maybe wants to learn, is join an early startup, a company that's 50 employees or less. because you'll get a lot of exposure in these small companies. You wear a lot of hats, you work with the founders, and you'll learn. You know, when I started on my 1776 adventure, the company I co-founded in DC, you know, I was by far the youngest person on our founding team. We had a founding team of 4, and my 2 other co-founders had started companies before. And I remember we, you know, we were getting everything ready. You know, we were gonna, you know, launch in a couple months or whatever. And I had like Googled like how to start a business, and I had like a list of like 25 things. And I brought the list to my co-founder, and I was like, okay, we need this, we need, you know, healthcare, we need, you know, all of these things. And he just looked at me like I had like 8 eyes and was like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't need any of that right now. We need to figure out if we can sell our vision first and, you know, start generating some revenue and some income before we, you know, plan out, you know, from steps A to Z. And so, you know, I really took that lesson to heart of, you know, you obviously need to, you know, think things through to some extent, but you also need to be more action driven and make sure that you're selling something that people want.
You touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned since starting your own business?
Well, one thing that comes top of mind right now is that you've got to give yourself brain space to kind of think bigger, to think strategically, and to think about, you know, where you want to go and how about what you're doing now is contributing to that vision. You know, right now we've got so many things going on, and it's great. But I really find, you know, the past couple months, I found myself totally down in the weeds. And so, you know, we're at the point where we need to hire. I need to delegate, you know, some of the things that I'm doing so that I can, as, you know, one of the leaders of this company, I can give myself brain space to chart out how we're driving forward. And I think that's always really important, of making sure that you're thinking big picture. And giving yourself the brain space to do that. I see so many of the founders in Mana Up, you know, everyone's just slammed in a great way. But, you know, then you don't kind of pull back and think, where am I going with this? So I think it's always really important to do that. I also think, you know, some other really great lessons learned is to be able to make decisions and make them quickly, because if you make one, it could be wrong, but you'll learn it's wrong, and then you can, you know, go back and make another decision. And, you know, anytime, kind of a third lesson is to keep things as simple as possible. So anytime, you know, I find us like getting complex with some idea or something we're doing, I kind of pull back and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish with this? And what are the, you know, what's the simplest way for us to do that? Let's see if there's any other kind of good lessons learned. I think the other one is to bring in advisors and mentors into what you're doing. And that could be as a founder of a company. It could be in your role as an employee, wherever you are. But to bring in mentors and advisors and trust people and be open with people about what you're doing and where you want to go and things you may be lacking on, and try not to be defensive when they actually give you feedback. Right? You know, we all have things that we need to improve on. But I think those have been areas of huge growth for me. You know, either, you know, personal things of feedback, but also more, you know, business things of mentors and advisors who have said, I don't think, you know, this is the right thing because of X, Y, and Z. Maybe you want to rethink that. And I think it's important to have those sounding boards and people who aren't in your kind of, you know, immediate bubble to, you know, get their insights and thoughts.
So what advice would you give to someone who is looking to find a mentor that maybe is outside of their immediate bubble, but hasn't been able to find someone maybe they already worked for in the past, and who could they reach out to, you know, start to build that community and those sounding boards for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, one piece of advice is mentors don't necessarily need to be someone older than you. So it could be someone who's your peer. who is just a great sounding board for career advice or what they're going on. My best friend and I, we give each other career advice all the time because we're kind of going through things in different worlds, but can overlap. So, I think we kind of, or at least I did when I was young, I thought about mentors as like this older person who knows all the answers, but that's not necessarily the case. You can learn a lot from your peers. It could be someone just a year older than you. And it doesn't have to be one person. You can pull things from different people in your life. So I would say start with who you already have in your life. Who do you work with at your job? Who do you have friends with? Is there someone who, maybe you're kind of just acquaintances with, but you really admire their work? People, for the most part, are super happy to get on the phone or go to coffee or, do something like that. And maybe it's just a one-time thing, but maybe it ends up being a long-term relationship. So I think, the first step is really to be very open and really look at the people in your life of what can they contribute to you and, what potentially could you contribute to them.
And then for lessons learned, you provided that, but then also what is the biggest lesson that you've learned or many lessons maybe as a woman in business and furthermore, a woman who owns her own business?
Mm-hmm. To always think bigger than what you're just naturally going to think. So we always have to question ourselves. Is that, big enough? Is that, could we be doing something better? We've had several opportunities that, have come along. We're like, if we were men, we would do this. And so kind of just, whether you're a female or a male, what, as a personality, what are your, natural tendencies and how do you kind of put checks in place so that you're asking yourself, am I doing that again? So I would say that's one piece of advice is, just to challenge, how confident you are in things and be even more confident than you think you should be. And then also getting, getting a male perspective on something. Do you think we should do this? Because I think that also gives you a lot of input on how would someone else who's in a different mindset think about an opportunity or think about what you're doing. And then, finally, I'm lucky because my co-founder Melly is a female, but she is extremely confident, and that really rubs off on everyone else on our team. And so I think that's also important is, what are role models and, other people in your life that have strengths that you can, learn from.
Awesome. So during this time, a lot of people have really lended a helping hand and wanted to support initiatives and companies that are close to them, or maybe even just connected in some way, for example, other USD alumni-owned businesses. So how can people support Mana and other companies that you partner with?
Thank you for asking that. So of course you can shop at houseofmanaup.com. Or if you're in Hawaii, you can visit our retail shop in Waikiki called House of Mana Up at the Royal Hawaiian Shopping Center. And then, we have all of the companies that are in our portfolio on our website, so you can check them out and, buy their product either from us or their own, websites. But also think about, for anyone who isn't in Hawaii, who are the other, local companies in your community that you can tie into. If you look at our portfolio and looking at Hawaii as a microcosm, 51 companies contribute 38 million in annual revenue to the state. The 325 jobs, they've the demographics of the group are quite diverse, 47% Native Hawaiian owned and 60% female led. And so, one thing that I think is really important about entrepreneurs and local companies is that, they are giving back to their own communities too. They're taking care of employees, that are, in their company, that are in your community. And one of the big learnings of the pandemic was, even though they were so hard hit, they were out there, donating to food banks, donating food, donating masks, shifting their production to making hand sanitizer. It was incredible to look across the portfolio and see them really step up for the community, despite, they were having their own challenges. And so I think the broader question is the importance of supporting the local entrepreneurs in your own community.
And then speaking of the local entrepreneurs that are in your community, are there any, obviously I know you love all of the ones that you work with, but if you could list a couple and kind of talk a little bit about what they do and the products they offer, I think it'd be cool to hear what you guys have going on and who you work with.
Yeah, so one company I'd love to spotlight is Big Island Coffee Roasters. They were on, I think actually right about now. I don't know what the time difference, but they're on Good Morning America today. And they are gaining national recognition for the quality of their coffee. And they are bringing a new light to Hawaii grown coffee. I guess, so much of the supply chain has been really counterfeit and not transparent over the years. And so things that aren't even Kona coffee were being sold as Kona coffee. And they're all about transparency into the supply chain and matching these very high quality, crops that we get with the best quality roasting. And they are getting national recognition for that. So we love them. They also have a little espresso bites bar. It looks and tastes like chocolate, but it's 3 shots of espresso. It's totally insane. It's great. It's good to just like have in your purse, in the afternoon. You need a little pick me up. So they're great. We also have another company called Kohana Rum. They do a agricole rum. They're based in Cuneo on Oahu, but they also just expanded to 200 more acres on the North Shore of Oahu. And they are getting up there in terms of production to being on the national stage. So we're really excited about them too. And I could go on forever, but those are 2 that are exciting.
Awesome. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure I talked to Brittany about this before, but everyone who's on this call or who registered and are watching at a later time, we will include the link to Mana App's website in the thank you email, so you can check out a bunch of the other different companies that they work with. So you won't be missing out on anything.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then we have a couple more questions before we move into some audience questions. Friendly reminder, if you do have any more questions for Brittany, we have about 10 minutes left, so you can throw them in the chat. But this wouldn't be a USD alumni event if I didn't ask you some alumni questions, or at least questions about USD. So the first is, what is your favorite spot on campus?
Well, I know that the campus has changed a lot since 2007. But I'm pretty sure this place still exists. So I loved the garden behind the IPJ that overlooks all of San Diego. I would always just get lunch and just hang out back there, just because it was so peaceful and beautiful. So that was definitely my favorite place on campus.
What about your favorite place off campus?
Ooh, off campus. I have so many great memories of Mission Beach. I mean, what other school you get to live on the beach, and as your off-campus housing?
I did an event a couple of weeks ago with an alumni-owned business, a food delivery service in Washington, D.C., and his name was Turner Hoff. And he basically said the exact same thing. He said, where in the country can you go to school where I can schedule all my classes for the afternoon, and in the morning I can either go to Mission Beach or even, do a quick trip down to Mexico to go surfing with my buddies. There's very few places you can do that.
Absolutely.
And then to follow that up, what is your favorite memory at USD? I'm sure you have a lot, but if you could pinpoint one.
Well, of course, I have to say meeting my husband.
Of course. So how did you meet your husband?
We both lived in the Valley freshman year. And so I saw him making his Halloween costume outside, and I was like, what are you doing? And then we started talking, and then we met up later that night and started dating a few weeks later and got married 6 years later.
Do you remember what the Halloween costume was?
It was Goldmember from Austin Powers.
Nice. I could see why you were questioning what he was putting together.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, who is this guy? What is he doing?
Oh, very cool. Well, we have a couple of questions that were submitted during registration, so we'll roll through that, and then everyone can take off for their day. But you had mentioned a couple of things about advice and what we would give to people, but what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received? And it could be in relation to work, or even can be in relation to just life.
Yeah. So it's going to kind of hit on something I mentioned earlier, but building relationships in your, we'll focus this on the professional side, is one of the best things you can do. You just really thinking about how can you invest in your professional relationships, whether they be peer, whether they, be someone who, you manage, or someone who, is your boss, or someone else who's superior in the organization. I would say very much focusing on that. I mean, I've done a, okay job of it through my life, but if I could go back and do it again, I would do an even better job of just building those relationships and, seeing how you can collaborate with people over time.
Couldn't find my mouse there for a second. Absolutely. I work in alumni relations, so I work in alumni relationship business. So that's the biggest thing that I tell people too, is just build those relationships, continue those contacts. And, I also too am really, I like to let people know that almost anyone can learn any skill, but it's really hard to be able to be relational and to develop those interpersonal skills. Those come more naturally to people, but you can certainly acquire them, but those are going to lead you longer down the road than you being, able to do a task very, very well.
Yeah, totally.
So how would you say that your USD education has helped your career? And I'm sure a parent who registered for this event asked you that question.
I really got the most out of my USD experience. I double majored in both accounting and political science, and I felt extremely well-rounded coming out of, graduation, and have utilized the skill set on the finance side, but very much, utilize the skill set, on the policy side. But I would also say that, kind of similar to building relationships, building relationships with professors is really important too, because coming out of college, they're the ones that are writing your letters of recommendation. They're the ones that you're putting down for referrals when you're applying to things. So, I was very appreciative of professors that, invested in me and invested in my education, but also were there to step up and, do what was needed when I was applying to various things.
Well, in return, you mentioned that you're speaking to a political science class next week, correct?
Yes, I am.
Which professor's class are you speaking to?
I think it's a combination of USD political science professors, but the one that invited me was David Shirk.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned this earlier, but you obviously Mana Up is doing very, very well. And you mentioned that you need to start delegating responsibilities. So are you hiring? And if so, what positions are you hiring for within Mana Up?
We are hiring. So right now we have a program manager role open, and that person is really the one in charge of developing out the accelerator programming, the workshops and the resources, and making sure that the companies are taking advantage of them, and we're always building out more and more resources for the alumni. So we're hiring for that person, and we're in interviews right now, but the application is still open. So love any talented people to apply for that. And I'm sure we'll have more positions open throughout the year. We also on our website have a link to all of the positions open with any of our portfolio companies. And there's everything from chocolate sommeliers to marketing assistants to, you name it. So definitely encourage anyone looking for a role in Hawaii to check that out.
That's awesome. Super helpful, especially for people who are looking for something right now, or, are in a role that they might just want to make a change from. So that's really a great option for people. And then the last question I have for you is you mentioned that you're on Maui, but what hidden gems are there in your area? So for anyone who is either from the area and looking to try to find something new, or tourists who are like, hey, I want to try to avoid tourists at all costs when I come to your island, what would you recommend that people do? Either maybe it's hiking or, you know, a restaurant that you really like.
There are a lot of amazing things on Maui. Now, the last year has been incredible because there have been no tourists on the beach. So we've had the beaches to ourselves. But some good hidden gems. One of them is a restaurant called Tin Roof, which is owned by Chef Sheldon Simeon, who is part of he was on Top Chef a couple times. My husband and I love that place and probably order there once or twice a week. So I definitely recommend Tin Roof. Our kids' favorite beach is Slaughterhouse Beach. And that's up past Kapalua. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's got great waves for the kids most of the year. And we love that spot. And then we also go out to Hana every year and we stay out there a couple nights. You know, many people will try to do the road to Hana in a day. And it's just, I mean, it's great. Hana is so beautiful, but it's also really stressful to try to get everything done. And there's so many amazing things to see. So I always recommend to people try to stay out there a day or two, whether you're camping or staying at the hotel, and really, enjoy the hikes that are out there because it's just amazing. And one in particular is Waimoku Falls. It has this 300-foot waterfall that's just absolutely stunning and breathtaking, and it's well worth the effort to get out there.
Oh man, you're making me want to go to Hawaii right now. Well, Brittany, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about yourself and Mana Up. I know a lot of people on this call, I'm sure, learned, had a couple of different takeaways. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me, Megan, and thank you to everyone who joined the call.
Well, great. So for everyone who's still on the call, thank you so much for joining us. For those who are going to be watching at a later time, also thank you to you too. If you would like to connect further with Brittany on anything that was discussed today, her email will be included in the follow-up email for the event, similar to any information that we have about Mana Up, we'll include it there too. If you'd like to learn more about the Alumni Association, the Honolulu Torero Club, or what programs there are to get involved with, please email me at meorourke@sandiego.edu. All right, everyone. Well, that wraps up our time. We hope you had an enjoyable time and that you will join us for another virtual event here soon. Take care and have a great rest of your day.